We are really excited about what's coming up in 2022. In particular, Zach and I each have a show, a book, and a movie that we're really looking forward to, and we are going to go over what our most anticipated movie, book, and show of 2022 is. And so we'll share what it is, a little bit of the reason why, and we'll go back and forth. And we are going to start off with Zach. What is your most anticipated show coming out in 2022?
So this should be no surprise, but the trailer for it just dropped. Like the actual trailer for it just dropped a couple weeks ago. I'm pumped for Halo, man. The Halo series coming out. I grew up on Halo. I had the first 3 video games, first 4. Well, I owned the first 3, played the first 4. It's been a franchise that's been a staple of my childhood, or was a staple of my childhood. So when I saw this is coming out, listen, I think it might be a little late. They might have missed the boat on the hype around Halo, but, better late than never. The old guys like me that grew up on it are pumped. If you guys also love Halo, you can definitely check out one of our podcasts or earlier ones where you can listen to me talk at Cody for about 3.5 hours about Halo. If you really,
it's a good
really
conversation,
into it. Yeah. So that's my number one.
I feel like my most anticipated show of 2022 probably won't come as a surprise for people who've been following Parallel Quest for a while, but it's definitely Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. That is my most anticipated show, for better, for worse. I am very much looking forward to it, mainly because I just want to know, does it stink? Or is it good? I just need to know, can Amazon adapt a show based on the histories of Middle-earth and make it entertaining, good, and faithful to Tolkien? I am super skeptical. But at the same time, if they can deliver on this, I think it can be one of the most fulfilling shows to be released if they can do it right. Because Middle-earth is huge. There's so much potential there with what you can do in a series. The question is, does Amazon really have what it's going to take in order to do this show right? After watching Wheel of Time, I have to be honest, I am a little skeptical, because just throwing a lot of money at something and owning the rights to make something doesn't guarantee that it's going to be good. And I look forward to the fall, because we're going to find out really quick whether or not it is. So Zach, why don't we go now into what our most anticipated book is of 2022 for those of you who are readers, and then maybe for those of you who aren't readers, this will give you a little bit of insight in the type of stuff we like to read and a good place to start reading for yourself.
Yeah. So for me, if you guys have been, listening to the podcast long enough, you definitely know I'm a huge fan of Stephen King. I try and read as much of him as I can. And so when Cody, you told me that he was having a book called Fairy Tale come out. It's coming out this year. I was like, that's the first Stephen King book in a good while that I've actually been very excited about. So I know I'm a huge fan of him, but I've kind of been a little unimpressed with what he's come out. I'm impressed with the amount that he still is cranking out. He cranks out a book or two a year at age 78. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a quality issue at this point with some of his stuff. I think he's a household name, but just from what I've heard and a little bit that I've read, it's just he's not the Stephen King of old people are feeling. And so when I saw Fairy Tale is coming out, I thought, okay, I appreciate that Stephen King might be trying to, do something a little different within the fantasy genre, but if it's Stephen King like we know Stephen King, it'll have elements of horror and suspense. And so I'm super pumped for this book to come out this year. I will be buying an advance copy.
Very nice. And this is the one reason why I texted you. That's actually a book that I will probably be looking forward to reading of Stephen King's. And I'm not really a horror guy. I give it a try. I'll give it a go. I'll go with Zach's recommendations, but it's not necessarily my first go-to. But I'm warming up to horror more and more. And so I guess that leaves me to name my most anticipated book, which is The Lost Metal, which is the 7th book in the Mistborn saga, the 4th book in the second era of Mistborn. Mistborn is a awesome fantasy series because it is 7 books that span 2 major eras. So the first series, Mistborn 1 through 3, The Final Empire, Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages, is like a high fantasy type of series. Very satisfying, fulfilling. We have a whole entire podcast episode dedicated to the Final Empire, and it all revolves around a group of rebels trying to overthrow a empire. Very typical storyline, but it has twists and turns that make it interesting. The first book is actually a fantasy-based heist story, and I find that very fascinating. And each book gets a little more interesting because it adds new elements to the magic system called allomancy, and that is basically the power that individuals can consume metals and burn them in their body to have some type of magical power, whether it is defying physics or getting super strength or being able to tap into people's emotions. There's a lot of cool things that are able to be done. And so the second era takes place in a steampunk type of era, somewhat of a late industrial age setting. The world has evolved, it's changed, we're in a new place, and so this 4th book is going to conclude that series, and I highly recommend checking out Mistborn. I'm looking forward to the last book of the Wax and Wayne series. I think it's going to be satisfying. This lost metal that we're talking about has been alluded to since the early books, and we're finally going to be getting an answer on what that is. So I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be worth the read. Sanderson is always a good time.
Sanderson also is one of those guys that somehow has a magic system for every world in his head. Like he's so in depth too. It's not just like, oh, here's magic, it works, don't worry about it, here's the story. It's like there's substance behind it. I mean, this guy's a once in a generation writer, and I know people knock him on his writing, like it's not anything to write, no pun intended, to write home about, but the creativity that goes into his worlds and his stories is unparalleled, in my opinion.
Let's finish this off by sharing our most anticipated movie of 2022. Zach, kick us off.
So I have not seen Toy Story since Toy Story 3 came out. And so I kind of skipped Toy Story 4. I thought it was more of a marketing ploy, kind of, hey, younger generation, older generation, don't forget this is a franchise we have. I didn't appreciate it. Never went and saw it. But what I do appreciate, and I think this is really cool, is the Lightyear movie coming out this year about the origin story of Buzz Lightyear. And not so much the Buzz Lightyear that we know in the Toy Story movies, but the actual character of Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story universe. And I think that's a really cool take on how can we expand the Toy Story universe a little bit without giving every single character a cheesy backstory movie. Like, we don't need to know how Woody came into Andy's possession. We don't really need to know how Buzz Lightyear came into Andy's possession. We kind of know, but we don't really need to know that. What is cool, and what I really am interested in this one, is this is the movie, so we will be watching the movie that Andy would have watched that got him excited about Buzz Lightyear and made him want to have the toy. And so this is kind of like a movie within a movie. Yeah. Within a universe. And so I think it's so creative. It's one of the best things Pixar, I think, has done in the past 5 years, is kind of get all the creative juices flowing and come up with a really cool concept. And so I'm really excited about this Lightyear movie because we don't really know much about Buzz just based off of what he says, but most of those are just catchphrases. So where do those all come from? Yeah. Why does he dress the way he does? Like, what was his profession, or what would have his profession been other than, hunting down Zurg or whatever the guy's name was? So yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to this because I think this is one of the most creative things Pixar has done in a long time.
Yeah, I think that will be a fun one to experience. And of course, because I've got kids, I'm really looking forward to take them to go see it. And it's like those connecting points to where, hey, Toy Story was a movie when I was a kid. My kids still like it, but now Lightyear can be a good launching point for them to get even more into the series.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting. And for me, my most anticipated movie is one that I'm going to say is exciting for me, not necessarily because I think it's going to be the best movie of 2022, but it has me more curious than anything else. And my curiosity is basically, are we finally going to be able to see a good movie based on a video game? And the movie is Uncharted, which is actually coming out here in a couple weeks. So I'm really looking forward to seeing if Sony can pull off adapting their premier character for the PlayStation, Nathan Drake, into a movie that actually has some substance. And I think that it should be able to be successful because treasure hunt type of films are just naturally exciting. We like treasure hunt stories, we like bombastic action, but the question is going to be, can Nathan Drake be a beloved hero, kind of like Indiana Jones was in the 80s? Can they do that now that there's somewhat of a void of the beloved treasure hunter in storytelling right now? And no one's really been able to step up to that place for a long time. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see, can they make a good video game movie? I'm excited to see if this movie's any good at all. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I think that it can work because the games are a lot more grounded than your typical video game, but we shall see.